In 1946, American forces released 17-year-old Gudrun Himmler, daughter of SS leader Heinrich Himmler, from detention. She would spend 7 decades defending her father's memory and supporting former Nazi officers through a secretive organization called Stille Hilfe. The paths taken by Nazi children diverged dramatically. Martin Bormann Jr., son of Hitler's private secretary, rejected his father's ideology completely, converting to Catholicism and working as a missionary. This stark contrast raises profound questions. Can our blood determine who we become? Are we bound to our family legacies? Or can we forge our own identities regardless of our origins? These questions echo through the lives of those born to history's most notorious figures. Childhood in the shadow of power. Growing up as Nazi elite. During the height of Nazi power, a select group of children experienced a world unlike any other. These were the sons and daughters of Hitler's inner circle, growing up with privilege in environments where their fathers were treated as national heroes and visionaries. Their childhood experiences would form the foundation for lifelong psychological struggles that few could comprehend. Heinrich Himmler, architect of genocide, maintained a strikingly affectionate relationship with his daughter Gudrun. He arranged for her to be flown from Munich to his Berlin headquarters, maintaining daily phone calls and weekly letters where he called her Puppy. This tender fatherly devotion existed as a chilling counterpoint to his methodical orchestration of mass murder, a psychological paradox these children would inherit like a dark birthright. These privileged children inhabited worlds built on stolen power and wealth. Etta Göring's childhood unfolded at Hall, her father's opulent estate doubling as a monument to his ego. Hermann Göring, who amassed one of history's largest art collections through theft and coercion, showered his daughter with extraordinary treasures. A priceless Madonna and Child painting by Lucas Cranach the Elder hung in a child's room, while its rightful owners may have faced persecution or death. The Nazi regime deliberately showcased these children as living propaganda. Their carefully orchestrated public appearances transformed family moments into political theater, projecting an image of Nazi officials as devoted family men with strong moral values. Albert Speer Jr. experienced this surreal childhood differently, occasionally present at Hitler's mountain retreat in Berchtesgaden, playing under the watchful eye of the Führer himself. Moments of childhood innocence amid discussions that would determine the fate of millions. Their carefully constructed world began fracturing as Allied forces closed in. For Etta Göring, the collapse came when she and her mother fled to Obersalzberg in the war's final days. The mountain that once symbolized the pinnacle of Nazi power became their last refuge as their former life of luxury disintegrated around them. The most profound rupture occurred during the Nuremberg trials, when these children confronted the true nature of their father's actions. The protective bubble shielding them from reality burst completely. They witnessed their fathers, men they had known only as loving parents and respected leaders, exposed as criminals responsible for atrocities on an industrial scale. This moment of reckoning shaped the trajectories of their lives in profoundly different ways. Some spent decades in denial, unable to reconcile the loving father with the monster revealed at Nuremberg. Others dedicated their lives to either defending or denouncing their father's legacies. The psychological weight of carrying these infamous surnames proved a burden too heavy for some to bear. The defenders, those who stood by their father's legacy. For the descendants of Nazi leaders who witnessed their father's condemnation at Nuremberg, an impossible choice emerged: accept the horrifying truth or construct an alternative reality. While some chose to denounce their infamous parents, others embarked on lifelong campaigns to defend the very men history had branded as architects of genocide. Gudrun Himmler's devotion to her father transcended mere filial loyalty. Until her death in 2018 at age 88, she maintained that Heinrich Himmler was murdered by Allied assassins, rather than taking his own life after capture. Her conviction drove her involvement with Stille Hilfe, or Silent Aid, a clandestine organization providing financial and legal support to former SS members who were fugitives from justice or imprisoned for war crimes. Through this network, she continued her father's legacy by supporting those who had carried out his orders. Wolf Hess pursued a similar path of defending his infamous parent. Like Gudrun, he transformed personal loyalty into public advocacy, establishing the Committee to Free Rudolf Hess, which attracted hundreds of thousands of supporters, including prominent German political figures. Through multiple books, Wolf portrayed his father as a misunderstood German patriot rather than Hitler's deputy and war criminal. When Rudolf Hess died in Spandau prison in 1987, Wolff immediately rejected the official suicide ruling, claiming British captors had murdered him, a narrative that found traction among those already receptive to revisionist history. These children faced the same psychological crucible, reconciling loving childhood memories with documented atrocities. "My father was a good man," Göring insisted during a rare 1990s television interview about Hermann Göring, revealing the powerful need to preserve positive parental images despite incontrovertible evidence of crimes. When forced to choose between accepting a beloved father as a mass murderer or embracing conspiracy theories, denial became the only psychologically survivable option for many. These defenders typically found validation in closed communities of like-minded sympathizers. Gudrun Himmler regularly attended secretive veterans gatherings where former SS officers reinforced her worldview, while Wolf Hess surrounded himself with political extremists who shared his revisionist beliefs. Within these echo chambers, alternative narratives received constant validation rather than challenge, allowing their convictions to strengthen rather than diminish with time. What makes these stories particularly striking is how they illuminate fundamental aspects of human psychology. Even in extreme cases, where parents orchestrated mass murder on an industrial scale, the need to preserve positive parental images can override objective reality. The cognitive mechanisms that allow us to maintain coherent family narratives can, in extreme circumstances, manifest as complete denial of historical fact. The rejectors, breaking free from notorious legacies. Niklas Frank, son of Hans Frank, the Butcher of Poland, stood at the vanguard of a remarkable group of Nazi descendants who made the painful decision to publicly condemn their parents. Unlike those who retreated into denial, Niklas committed himself to a lifetime of brutal honesty. He authored scathing books like In the Shadow of the Reich that unflinchingly documented his father's crimes. His motivations were clear. "I want to make sure that my father's crimes are not forgotten," he stated, transforming his family burden into a moral mission of historical witness. The rejectors among Nazi descendants faced common challenges, confronting unbearable truths rather than denying them, navigating complex family bonds, and rebuilding identities from the ruins of infamous legacies. Each found different paths forward through this psychological minefield. While some rejectors found their path through public testimony, others sought redemption through personal transformation. Martin Bormann Jr., son of Hitler's powerful private secretary, converted to Catholicism and dedicated decades to missionary work in Africa. His choice to serve communities in Congo and Cameroon represented a conscious effort to counterbalance his father's legacy of hatred with his own life of service. This spiritual journey wasn't merely an escape from his past, but a deliberate attempt at personal atonement. The path of rejection didn't always involve complete renunciation. Rolf Mengele experienced this complexity firsthand when he traveled to South America in 1977 to meet his fugitive father, the infamous Angel of Death who had performed horrific experiments on concentration camp prisoners. Rather than finding a monster or a repentant sinner, Rolf encountered something perhaps more disturbing, a man utterly unrepentant about his actions. This meeting left him trapped in an impossible position. Later reflecting, "I despised my father and everything he represented, yet I couldn't betray him." The act of maintaining a professional distance was the manifestation of rejection for Albert Speer Jr. Throughout his career as an architect, he made a conscious effort to avoid any relationship with the architectural legacy left by his father. He stated in a straightforward manner, "I have tried my whole life to separate myself from my father." Speer selected a more subdued method of disengagement, in contrast to Niklas Frank's more outspoken condemnation of the situation. In many cases, the personal cost of being rejected was significant. As a result of their private knowledge of the past haunting their reconstructed public lives, many descendants of Nazis changed their surnames or acquired whole new identities. They lived in the shadows. This anonymity came with its own price, which was a kind of psychic split, with many people living in continual terror of being discovered. Most poignantly, these individuals who rejected were frequently found to be straddling two different worlds without a group to call their own. They were met with animosity from Nazi sympathizers who considered them to be traitors to their blood, while at the same time, they were forced to contend with mistrust from Holocaust survivors who were unable to completely disassociate themselves from the horrors committed by their fathers. The double rejection that they experienced created a psychological no man's land in which they were forced to establish their identities without the assistance of a social group that was welcoming to them. It is not only in our collective memory that the legacy of the Third Reich continues to reverberate through the decades, but it is also in the lives of those who bear the most terrible history of all, the offspring of Nazi officials. Over the course of several decades, this legacy has continued to reverberate. As a consequence of the method in which modern Germany addresses its history through the development of memorials, educational programs, and locations dedicated to commemorating the Holocaust, A framework has been established within which the descendants of those who perished in the Holocaust are compelled to negotiate their own identities. In light of the fact that they went in different directions, ranging from an ardent dedication to a complete rejection, it is clear that there is no one way to react to a load of this magnitude. Their experiences shed light on our comprehension of the trauma that is passed down from one generation to the next, which is one of the reasons why their stories are of such great significance. The stories that they have to tell are handed down from one generation to the next. Psychologists are of the opinion that this phenomena manifests itself in a manner that is unique to each individual, and that it has an impact not only on the individual's sense of self, but also on the manner in which they interact with other people. Nevertheless, despite the fact that these children did not have the ability to select their family tree, they have been pushed to develop their identities within the context of their family tree. The burden of history is passed down from one generation to the next, and every voyage is a demonstration of how this tradition is passed down. To what extent does society find a way to strike a balance between compassion and justice in light of the fact that the consequences of atrocities continue to resonate beyond time? These challenges are created by the moral inheritance that these families have inherited, which creates challenges that extend beyond the scope of these families specifically. Who is ultimately responsible for healing the wounds that have been caused by the events that have occurred in the past after everything has been said and done?